Hey everyone, True here, and today we are going to do a quick review of the first new burn SSR in 6 months, Gilgamesh. We will cover her strengths, her weaknesses, and which tier she will go to, but first let's take a look at her AI. In terms of her threat level, her hate will rise by 20% if she is burning, and a further 30% if all units in battle are burning. If this condition is met, of course, she can use her Royal Judgment, but I think worth it to point out here that these kind of threat level conditions actually help her because she has that kind of burning heart plus, which means if she is burning and would die, then her burn is extinguished and she heals back up to 100% instead, which immediately resets her threat level to 100% as well, meaning she could have some pretty annoying survivability. But what can she do while she is staying alive? Of course, there is the Royal Flame, her basic skill that she would probably mostly use if she cannot use anything else. The Burning Blaze with the exact same weight here, but should generally be used if she has the spirit and is burning. Royal Ignition, of course, her go-to skill, nothing really more important than using that because it is an instant skill and there is only an upside on using it. And when everybody is actually burning on the battlefield and she has enough spirit, then she will go for the Royal Judgment over the Burning Blaze and the Royal Flame, because this has a 5.0 weight. Now, under certain circumstances, this is not ideal. Sometimes a Burning Blaze that hits 2 targets can be actually more effective than the Royal Judgment. But all in all, the AI on this one looks relatively solid and straightforward, although of course it is a bit of a question in terms of the targeting of the Royal Judgment as well, if it always hits those targets that would usually survive, which she is able to kill with that skill. And that's actually a perfect segue into the next part of the video, which is covering her strengths. And one of them, of course, is that kind of Royal Judgment skill that is absolutely fatal, ignoring any passives that would prevent the target from being defeated, and at the same time dealing that kind of 750% damage, which means if the target isn't armored up, then this looks like a relatively certain death on an eco power level. And compared to some other fatal skills that we have seen, what is nice about this one is that she can easily set this up herself with the Royal Ignition and directly gets the turn, hopefully afterwards, usually with the whole battlefield burning. Of course, there are some units that may not immediately get that kind of ignition, then the Royal Judgment will remain locked. And if enemies die, the reinforcements usually don't enter in a burning way. So this is a bit of a limit to the Royal Judgment, which does seem necessary though. The second royal skill, the Royal Ignition, is absolutely great for burn teams as well. Setting fire to the battlefield, healing all allies for full HP, and additionally producing some spirit on top, and all that for an instant skill, setting herself up potentially for the Royal Judgment, is just really great. And there's just a 100 time unit lock on that, so every 100 time units, if she gets the turn and is awake, she can do that Royal Ignition skill, which fully heals her team every time. And the Royal Ignition will also be the skill that she will use, of course, at the start of a battle when she gets the turn. And in a burn team, her start setup is quite insane, with that immediate 150 time unit stun against all enemies, if there is no stun absorber on the enemy team, of course. On her own team, also stunning her allies, but keep in mind that just like Gilgamesh, a lot of other burn units like Nobunaga and Commander Astrid or Bright Astrid have stun immunity, or at least partial stun immunity, so they will not be affected by this. And then it's basically a steamroll at the very start. If that kind of stun goes through, the whole burn team and her will pass Royal Judgment on an enemy team. and quite a few attacks at that, because her time units are super low as long as she is burning. 50% TU reduction, and so she can have multiple Royal Judgments or Burning Blazes until the enemy gets another turn. Of course, she needs some spirit production for that, maybe from some other burn allies on her team. And the good news here is that she will also help her teammates in that she gives them an additional quicken to all her burn allies. And she also enrages them whenever she gets a kill, possibly through Royal Judgment or something else. So as I said, if that kind of stun goes through, this enables a team steamroll that is unlike anything that we've seen before in Evertale. The permanent stun immunity, as mentioned, is really nice for her, but so is another part of her passive, which makes her immovable, meaning she cannot be pushed back or banished from the battlefield, meaning she might be able to have a permanent presence against enemies like Cleopatra. Although, important to point out again, it's really important for her to either have the burn status effect or no status effect, preferably the former, because of that really strong burning heart plus passive, which means if she is burning, would die, she survives at 1 HP instead, loses the burn status effect and heals back to 100% HP. And also, as mentioned before, the kind of AI threat level conditions that she has work really well with that, because when she is burning, when there's a lot of or all units burning on the battlefield, she will be a big target. But if she is targeted without taking care of that burn status effect, then she will just heal back to 100% HP and lose the threat level conditions, which means she might get another chance to just burn again and activate the Burning Heart Plus. But you might have heard it through already in some parts of this video. In terms of her weaknesses now, we definitely have to point out that big glaring weakness against normal sleep, that is non-cursed sleep. Yes, at least she can use the Royal Ignition to basically wake up her teammates as well, so that is a strong addition for burn. However, if she is sleeping herself and there are no allies that wake her up, she can be a very easy kill, especially because she has a disadvantage against water units. So she really would like to be constantly burning, and another way to get around that is poison. We are getting more and more super and mega poison, but here in this case it's really important the fact that at all she gets poisoned and then kind of loses the Burning Heart Plus, which would keep her alive, so an attack shortly after that could mean her defeat. Though to be fair, she herself messes with poison teams a bit as well, with the kind of constant re-ignition can also be quite annoying to poison enemies. And even more so, of course, against stun teams and cursed sleep teams, both of which have very little to counter Gilgamesh's skill set. But do they need to counter Gilgamesh if they can counter her team? Not so much, and that is another weakness of Gilgamesh, of course, is that she is so burn reliant in terms of her team setup as well. Yes, there is a world where you can use her outside of a burn team, but similar to Commander Astrid, it's not really a great look. A lot of her skills actually only synergize with burn team mates. For example, the Royal Ignition giving some additional spirit, enraging her burn team mates, and of course the stun immunity on her allies is also super important to get the most out of that initial 150 time unit stun to every unit on the battlefield. And speaking of that stun, one problem that we can also see with that initial setup is that we see more and more stun immunities. Of course, if she is facing burn, that is logical, and I mean, if it's burn versus burn, I would still prefer to have Gilgamesh on my side. But there's also more and more non-burn units that at least bring stun wards to the table, and so they may not be affected by that initial stun. For example, a new unit like Cleopatra might very well still get a turn immediately after Gilgamesh. And even more importantly, somebody like Light Anya on an enemy team might absorb the whole stun. Of course, Light Anya at that point might be taken out of the battle, although of course she can be reset by some teammate potentially. But in any case, that kind of setup would mean that you don't have that kind of initial steamroll without any interruptions. And of course, during that initial period, you hopefully get actually some kills, and of course these units entering, some of which having lightspeed entry like Angel Sheen, might actually throw a wrench in your plans as well. Last but not least, a final little note, there is no armor ignore on any of her attacks, which isn't insanely important given the huge damage that she can push out, for example the 750% Royal Judgment. But especially considering that we just saw the release of Water Anya, one of her main counters, I would say, not ignoring that power barrier on the enemy team might get quite annoying. So where does that leave us? As you can see on the screen, the poll on my channel suggests that she will go to the SS tier. And I mean, arguably, she has a super strong skill set, very good opening setup, which means Platoon 1 style might be rewarded. But at the end, she is still a burn unit, and she may be the strongest burn unit. I think that's actually the case, even better than Commander Astrid. But she won't be as universally usable as somebody like Nobunaga potentially. And all in all, given the weaknesses that I just listed, I don't quite think it will be enough to reintroduce burn into the Platoon 1 meta in the arena at a top level. So that's why I think she may only make it into the S tier, where Commander Astrid also resides. Although, of course, that's quite low compared to the poll results, so maybe I'm in the wrong here. But without further burn releases, I think her ceiling will be the S tier. That being said, if you run a burn team, if you intend to build a burn team, Gilgamesh is an absolute must-have right now. Even if you can only afford one copy at first. Even at one copy, her Royal Ignition skill is super strong and may already set a great environment for your other burn characters. Let me know what your thoughts on Gilgamesh are in the comments. Thanks to Nizetto and Saturn for the visuals used in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. And as always, thanks for watching.